vengeance, I forget and the score, and I can't choose in my what I sense in my what I choose in my what I sense in my love, hate, passion, and war. The strangest intervention is forgetting me more, and I can't sense in my what I choose in my what I sense in my what I choose in my what I sense my what I sense in my. The wildest interventions, I forget and the score, and I can't choose in my what I sense in my what I choose in my what I sense in my love, hate, passion, and war. The strangest intervention is forgetting me more, and I can't sense in my what I choose in my what I sense in my what I choose in my what I sense my what I sense in my. Senses in my wide eye, 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 senses in my. Wildest interventions, I forget and swore, and I can't choose in my what I sense in my what I choose in my what I sense in my what I sense my what I sense in my wide eye senses 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 in my.
Hello everybody, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's episode, the first ever episode of the Spencer Walsh Show. We have a great one for you today. We're going to be talking about a lot of major things, starting with a little bit of news, some very interesting news today, as we remember the first Black Secretary of State ever. Colin Powell had such a big role in shaping the way the United States interacted with the world for decades upon decades. He passed away today of COVID-19 complications. So we're going to go over some of his life and legacy. And believe it or not, today, I also want to talk a little bit about another Powell, and that's Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. You may say, oh, who's that? That sounds boring. Like, this is like a freeform radio show. Why are we talking about him? Well, I'm trying to explain it, and it is a crazy, crazy story. But first, what I do want to do is start off with a little bit of a warm-up song, and no better way to warm up to ease into a great hour of music as well, because we could probably do a half and half talk in music, the music part being hip-hop and R&B for today's show. I want to get a little bit of Frank Ocean's Bad Religion.
Taxi driver, be my shrink for the hour, leave the meter running. It's rush hour, so take the streets if you wanna. Just outrun the demons, could you? He said, Allahu Akbar. I told him don't curse me. Boy, you need prayer. I guess it couldn't hurt me. If it brings me to my knees, it's a bad religion. swear I've got 3 lives balanced on my head like stick knives. I can't tell you the truth about my disguise. I can't trust no one. And you say Allahu Akbar. I told them don't curse me. But boy, you need prayer. I guess they couldn't hurt me. If it brings me to my knees, it's a bad religion. Oh, unrequited love to me is nothing but a one-man cult in cyanide in my styrofoam cup. I can never make them love me, never make them love me. No, it's a bad religion to be in love with someone who could never love you. Only bad religion could have me feeling the way I do.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now time to get thoroughly into a news portion of the show today. So do appreciate that, you joining us here today. So we're going to get into, because the big news, without a doubt, is the death and the passing away of Colin Powell, age 84. And he really was a very, very interesting figure within the bounds of American history, such a big figure in terms of his influence on American foreign policy. He was a really kind of a path breaker for a lot of people, even people who very seriously did disagree with him in his views on politics. He was the country's first African-American National Security Advisor, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Secretary of State. He was, really had that had the upbringing. I saw a tweet from Representative Jamal Bowman talking about this today. It was very, very interesting, and it comes to give you a window on, how someone like him, who we consider a pretty progressive guy, he had a very similar background. He went to City College of New York, grew up in the South Bronx, and went through the Army, through the Reserve Officer Training Corps program, the ROTC. From a young second lieutenant commissioned in the dawn of the newly desegregated Army, Powell served 2 decorated combat tours in Vietnam. He was later National Security Advisor to President Ronald Reagan at the end of the Cold War, which is a pretty important time. That piece there is from the New York Times, and that is something that I think a lot of people will have a little bit of a struggle with when it comes to Colin Powell, and that is talking about some of the more kind of controversial parts, or at least parts in more recent years, with our kind of reckoning that we've seen with the in the wake of the Iraq War, and really reconsidering what America has done abroad. It has been very, very interesting to watch this whole kind of thing come out, because this is where it starts. Like, his time in the military, he was promoted to admiral, and he had a pretty significant role in covering up and kind of dealing with the public relations fallout that the United States Army dealt with from a little thing called the My Lai Massacre back in the Vietnam War, which is, if you don't know, is probably one of the most well-publicized United States war crimes during that war, where they pretty much killed a village of civilians, including women and children. And he was a Army major at the time who was pretty, deeply involved in pretty much dealing with a lot of the fallout from what the U.S. Army went through there. And from there, as I was kind of reading a little bit about his life today, I saw it referred to as he was a kind of company man. He was somebody who was very much, and that that company was the the United States military. He was someone who was very much a patriot, and whatever that meant, whether it meant covering up for the good, or amplifying the good, or covering up for the bad, Colin Powell, I think it's fair to say, was there to do it. He then, this obituary here in the New York Times, goes on to talk about his time as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, which is pretty much the chairman of all the chair of the chairs of the Army, just the United States military in general. He was the architect of the invasion of Panama in 1989 and the Persian Gulf War in 1991, which ousted Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, but left him in power in Iraq. Along with then Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, Powell reshaped the American Cold War military in a way that stood ready as the Iron Curtain for half a century. In doing so, he stamped the Powell Doctrine on military operations, armed with clear political objectives and public support, used decisive and overwhelming force to defeat enemy forces. So that was really worked great, I think, for the United States for a long time. If you're talking about through the, all the adventures the United States had through the Cold War, whether it be in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, all the way up through, you're talking about the first Gulf War, the U.S. military operations in Afghanistan, years and years of the United States having these kind of, one-off, operations that were designed to prevent communism and pretty much reaffirmed in the minds of every American that we were the supreme country, we're the supreme military power, and nobody would want to, mess with us. And that was something that really did for Colin Powell's, helped Colin Powell a lot in terms of getting his reputation up as somebody who would be, someone who would generate a lot of public support. But then, go through the 80s, go through the 90s, still a very kind of respected figure from kind of the glory days of America at its kind of peak imperial phase. And then George W. Bush rolls around. He joins the George W. Bush administration. He returned to public service in 2001 as Secretary of State for President George W. Bush, whose father, Powell, had served as chairman of the Joint Chiefs a decade earlier. So yeah, he worked for George H.W. as chairman of the Joint Chiefs and George W., the son, as Secretary of State. He was, for that administration, him and kind of Condoleezza Rice, they were two people who were able to go on mainstream media, go past the kind of conservative bubble at the time in the early 2000s and really sell the Iraq War, which, as we pretty much all now, I think, would agree, turned out to be one of the most disastrous U.S. foreign policy mistakes. And you really cannot discuss Colin Powell's legacy without discussing the Iraq War and his role in it. But as the obituary here writes, but in the Bush administration, Powell was the odd man out, fighting internally with Cheney, then Vice President, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld for the era of President Bush and foreign policy dominance. He left at the end of Bush's first term, under the cloud of an ever-worsening war in Iraq and growing tensions about whether he could have done and should have done more to object to it. And of course, that, part of the New York Times article kind of leaves out the fact that he made a very, very influential United Nations speech right around that kind of like 2001 and 2002 period, where there was a lot of uncertainty. Well, pretty much what happened was there was a big segment of the population that, wanted blood, but a lot of people, after 9/11, people were arguably, rightfully so, pretty pissed off. But the way it happened was with the case that George W. Bush was selling, he wanted Iraq. And a lot of people were like, why don't we just hunt down bin Laden? So the case that he, Colin Powell, the respected Secretary of State, was able to do, and what he was able, the case he was able to make in front of the United Nations is this was a real kind of moral justice case, and Saddam Hussein is a bad, bad man with weapons of mass destruction, they're making them by the day. And of course, the real damning part of that legacy is none of that turned out to be true. We went into Iraq and really a lot of bad things, it's an understatement, happened as well. He did, though, have a little bit of an interesting transformation later in his career. He kept kind of a lower profile at the end of the Bush administration, and just over 2 weeks left in the 2008 presidential campaign, Powell, by then a declared Republican, gave a forceful endorsement to Senator Barack Obama, calling him a transformational figure. Powell's backing drew sharp criticism from conservative Republicans, as he was their, real man who led the operation or was a big part in the operation for Iraq. A lot of conservatives still thought warmly of him from that, but it definitely, and in the really charged aspects of the 2008 campaign, took a lot of guts for him to come out there and support Barack Obama, which he did. So it really eased a lot of doubts among some independents, moderates, and even some of his own party that, Barack Obama couldn't be, the strong man to be commander-in-chief. Colin Powell really was someone who I think overall could be seen as someone who's an icon of the American military for so many years. And that came with a lot of good, but it certainly did come with a very complicated legacy that a lot of people will still be thinking about today, I think. So with that being said, let's seamlessly transition back into the music side of things, if you don't mind. And I thought we'd get into this wonderful piece, this wonderful song from Black Party called Dancing that I have been absolutely loving listening to lately.
Talk to you, girl. I seen you dancing right here with your crew. It was your smile that brought me here to you. But maybe it's the way you hit your moves. Tell me, do you have a boo? And if not, then I wanna dance with you. You're so gorgeous that it's hard to keep my cool, but I'll keep it just to have a dance with you. Darling, tell me, can I talk to you? I seen you dancing from across the room, and told myself I gotta know you, I gotta know you, I gotta know you, I gotta know you. Hey, can I walk you to your car and maybe we can get some food? But you won't break my heart if you decline, it's cool. But I honestly wanna end my night with you. Hey, let me know what's the deal or something. I'm trying to chill or something. I wanna know who you are, you so fly to me, I swear it. And you got style, yo, I love the way that dress fit, yeah. Deep convos on a late night. If you smoke, you can take flight. If you don't, then it's alright. But if I have your permission, you can be the braille to my blind eyes, alright? Can I talk to you? I seen you dancing from across the room, and told myself I gotta know, I gotta know you, I gotta know you, I gotta know you.
Whatever goes around eventually comes back to you. So you gotta be careful, baby, and look both ways before you cross my mind.
Better than ever, cause your umbrella. Sun is beaming on me like headlights beaming on Bambit. Now let's pretend the street is the room and you are a Cameron, cause you're drama candid, the Tito to my Randy. Now let's produce some thrillers, my chocolate with your vanilla,
The
sun will come out. Nothing good ever comes easy. I know times are rough, but winners don't quit, so don't you give up. The sun will come out. Though we've been struggling endlessly, someday we'll find the love. 'Cause after the storm, I know it's hard, but did you even really try? Maybe you could understand when all you had to do was ask and just open your mind. When everything is passing by and all you had to do was try. Yeah, all you had to do was try. All you had to do was try.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to 91.5 WMFO Medford Tufts Radio. Very, very exciting stuff. That was After the Storm by Tyler, the Creator, and Cal Uchis. This is for any of you out there that may be listening from San Francisco or are from San Francisco, this is for you. This is a little song called Yay Area by E40.
To rap what key beat to lock, but we beat to rap what key beat to lock. We beat to rap what key beat to lock, but we beat to rap what key beat to lock. We beat to rap what key beat to lock, but we beat to rap what key beat to lock.
I got my second win, pimp.
We beat to rap
E40.
what key beat to lock, but we beat
Rick
to
Rock.
rap
I got
what
my
key
second
beat
win.
to lock.
Sick with a
We
BMA.
beat to rap what key beat to
Talk to
lock,
him,
but we
P.I.
beat to rap
Warner
what
Brothers.
key beat to lock.
With a
We
P.I.
beat to rap what key beat to
Talk to
lock,
him,
but we
P.I.
beat to rap what key beat to lock.
With a
We
P.I.
beat to
Heavyweight,
rap
a
what key
vet,
beat
not
to
an
lock,
amateur.
but we beat
Suited
to
up, I
rap
push
what
pies
key
like
beat to
Marie
lock.
Callen. What you gonna do? Use it up if I must. Take over shop, get out the car and walk. Sneak up on partner and do a dome. That's
We
right.
beat to rap what key beat to lock, but we beat to rap what
Then I'll
key
blend
beat
into
to
the
lock.
crowd.
We beat to rap what key beat to lock.
Hang with a bunch of hot heads, super hypey and wild. Tell your best to stop asking about a player, inquiring about a player. Can't right now, later. I'm busy getting my paper and riding around in my scraper, interacting, networking, and campaigning like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like McCormick's, I'm seasoned. I run my region. Y'all think I'm starving? Hell no. I'm eating. We eat. They barking like Dino lying and cheating. Keep jacking my lingo. One of these rappers gonna end up leaking. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back. We beat to rap, what key beat to lock. Cut a corner or two and bend the block. The West ain't been the same without Pac, so I guess it's up to E40 and Rick Rock. You hear 40 news? He on there coming. You hear 40 news? He on there dumping. He all my woman talk about that. Where you born at? Born and raised in the yacht. Got some folks in Lompoc and skeleton back. When I release, I had to measure finger on my head for having more paper than a paper shredder. Tycoon till I five. I don't sound like none of y'all. You getting independent scratch? Just remember that taught you that. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back. Like that? Tell the people that phony water is back.
Perfect.
I told.
Up in the morning, miss you bad. Sorry I ain't call you back. Same problem my father had. All his time, all he had, and what he dreamed. All his cash, market crash, hurt him bad. People get divorced for that. Drop some stacks, pops is good. Mama passed in Hollywood. If you ask, lost my soul, driving fast, lost control, off the road. Jaw was broke. Remember we always broke. Remember I'm coming back. I'll be taking all the stack.
I got broads in Atlanta. She's at the family. Credit cards in the scammers. Hitting the list in the drum. Legacies, family. Wait and see, look like a planet. Going out like a Montana. Honey killers on the helmets. Legacies, family. Wait and see, family. Pockets full, Danny. Selling ball, candy. Man on the macho like Randy. The chopper go out to for granted. Pull up your bandit. Hope the killers understand it.
Hey. I just wanna feel liberated.
Panda.
Take it off, stack.
I get broads in Atlanta, Trisha Dublin and shit, sippin' fountain. Credit cards in the scammers, wake up and some shit. That designer, whole bunch of shit. They be acting rats, I know we shit. I be pulling us up in the shit. I got plenty of stuff with Bugatti, but look how I do shit. Black is 6, found him. Why is he killing no comma?
How can I find you? Who do you turn to? How do I bind you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Damn right, bro. 4 a.m., I'm just getting started. For my birthday, I threw me a surprise party. Reminiscing about the trap playing the first quarter. My life changed when I had my first daughter. Got my first quarter flipping $50 slabs. Then looking at the bills, asking you for half. Cut from a different cloth. Take pride in results. Anytime she wanna dip, I'm providing the sauce. You on side of the boss, so you kinda the boss. You keep playing with me, I end up signing your boss. Drop an EP on it for the free on it. Yeah, you ZZ on it, king like BB on you. Yeah, rock with Champagne P. If it wasn't for the struggle, then I wouldn't be me. Call me Deuce or Dose, anything but broke. Got my aim from the scope, got the game by the throat.
Okay, you popped up on me by surprise. You see, I never took you for the popping type. Damn, it's 4 a.m., so please believe the hype. Hit the lights, I'm way over top. Pop it, flick it, drop a pin, send a location. I'ma pull up in that bullet coupe spaceship. Drop off a bag of some dangerous. I'ma hit you 4 a.m., see if you make it.
I drop Colin Grove out the sky. Ooh, in a group with the best rapper that's alive. Ooh, never turn my back on my slime. Ooh, I ain't wanna but she was fine. Ooh, hold up, baby, let me take my time. Ooh, hard to get some hit and try to drive. Ooh, jumping out the cake and that's surprising. Ooh, picking up the duffel bag like exercising. Ooh, bought my mom new house cause she deserve it. Ooh, practice makes perfect but nobody's perfect. Ooh, Escobar's not open for service. Ooh, send you to Dr. Miami for your surgery. Ooh.
Okay, you popped up on me by surprise. You see, I never took you for the popping type. Damn, it's 4 a.m., so please believe the hype. Hit the lights, I'm way over top. Pop it, flick it, drop a pin, send a location. I'ma pull up in that bullet coupe spaceship. Drop off a bag of some dangerous. I'ma hit you 4 a.m., see if you make it.
Ricardo TT on the crew neck. Ooh, on the killer rapper spread. You next. Ooh, they talking chillin', watching Netflix. Ooh, I used to trap and watch bootlegs. Ooh, I'm on my wave like a do-rag. Ooh, I see you boo, know where your crew at. Ooh, talking tequila for the pipe up. Ooh, I hope you got it clean vagina. Yeah, trench guard, really. Representing we the squad, really. Tech got the rolling, Nelly get it. I used to sell drugs for a living. Got me a job selling records. Had to use a jeweler for a reference. Might buy a Tron with the extra. Might use the legs for a necklace.
Okay, you popped up on me by surprise. You see, I never took you for the popping type. Damn, it's 4 a.m., so please believe the hype. Hit the lights, I'm way over top. Pop it, flick it, drop a pin, send a location. I'ma pull up in that bullet coupe spaceship. Drop off a bag of some dangerous. I'ma hit you 4 a.m., see if you make it.
Someday a friend may offer you a chance to visit the other side of a dream. Your ticket is a little packet of white powder called heroin. But every packet of heroin is different. You don't know what's getting into you. Some doses are so strong they kill. Heroin is so vicious that the criminals who make the big money in heroin don't use it. They know a lot of reasons why heroin is very, very dumb. Maybe that's why they call it dope.
Folks, heroin, it's not good. You do not want to use it. And on that note, we're going to get into a little bit of a conversation. And today, I never thought, on the first ever show I did here on WFMO, I'd be talking not one, but 2 times about somebody with the last name of Powell. But today is that day, because we have a very, very interesting story about just like this whole epidemic that's really been happening alongside the pandemic, which is a bunch of insider trading. And of course, you may be able to hear there's a little bit of a, emergency going on. So if you think that's you, it's me, don't worry. But hopefully everyone's okay. But we have the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell. In case anybody unaware, the Federal Reserve one of the most powerful economic influence engines, controlling how much money gets into and out of the economy. Really, something like Jerome Powell can say will move the stock market astronomically. So it is very, very important what he is up to, and people do not realize how much power the Federal Reserve has, even though they're unelected officials and all that. So there is some new reporting in the outlet, the American Prospect, about this guy, Jerome Powell, selling between $1 million and $5 million worth of stock from his personal account on October 1st, 2020, according to disclosure forms reviewed by the Prospect. Powell's sale of shares from a Vanguard Total Stock Market Index fund has not been previously reported. This sale occurred right before the Dow Jones suffered a significant drop. So obviously the total index fund, that is, that's everything. That's like a huge part of the Dow Jones. So taking that market index and, selling significant shares of it October 1st, 2020, that's a little bit suspicious if you're the Fed chair. So 3 other senior Fed officials have faced some pretty serious criticism for making stock trades during the pandemic. Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan and Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren were compelled to take, a little thing called nice early retirement as a result of the disclosure of their trades. Fed Vice Chair Richard Clarida also came under fire for some of his stock trading. The other trades are now subject to investigations by the Fed's own Inspector General and the SEC. There is no American with more insider knowledge about government policy that drives financial market movements than the chair of the Federal Reserve. And as COVID caseloads, hospitalizations, and deaths spiked last fall, the economy was in a very precarious position. October turned out to be pretty much, by the way, he sold the, pretty much the index of the stock market, total index, October 1st. And it just so happened that the chairman of the Federal Reserve happened to know that, I shouldn't allegedly know, but he made a good investment because it was October 2020 was one of the worst months for the stock market of the year, and it was a rough year for the stock market. Actually, it turned out to be the stock market's worst month since 2020 when the pandemic began. And it would recoup its losses in the subsequent months, but still, Powell's stock sale came against the background of President Trump balking over an urgently needed economic stimulus package, and a day later, Trump announced to the public that he had tested positive for COVID. Meeting long showed that Powell had been in contact with Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin 4 times on October 1st. Powell had been pressing the administration to support more fiscal stimulus, so the sole responsibility for rescuing the economy would be not on the Fed and monetary policy. So pretty much really pressure here in this situation, and you can see these kind of economic incentives lining up. And it was similar situations for other Fed chairs. And the crazy thing about a lot of this stuff is it is very much illegal, and it's very, very hard to create significant consequences for these people because so that they just don't do this. And there's been a lot of examples with senators. Dianne Feinstein is one example. She's somebody who people just are not sure if she's able to remember what she had for breakfast that morning. She's so old, but she somehow knows to make all the right pandemic related stock trades at the exact right time. Nancy Pelosi's been dinged for this before. I'm sure it happens. Insider trading, probably the most, committed crime out of a lot of them, because you got to imagine the enforcement is just so poor. We've seen stories of senators on both sides of the aisle. Dianne Feinstein's one of them. Richard Burr, he's I believe a Virginian senator. He got busted for it at the beginning of the pandemic, and it really just shows you because he was in these secret intelligence meetings in months before the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden he's out there buying stocks in Zoom when no one else is, and that's it's a little bit of an eyebrow raiser, at least in my opinion. But he has been, Powell. He's probably the most significant example of it, because as much power as a senator has, they do not have as much direct power over the economy as the Fed chair. So that is why a lot of people have been, raising a lot of eyebrows on this. And it's really tough. It seems like something, if you're an everyday lay person, you probably think it's the most obvious thing in the world that stock trades from senators should be regulated. But a lot of the people who would be regulating these stock trades are the ones doing the stock trades. So it's very, very hard to imagine. It's very, very hard to, kind of comfortably think that anything is going to get done here, because a lot of these people in some of the most powerful positions in the country have just no incentive to make any kind of change and fix the clear, bad influence, bad picture that's going on here, because they're literally the ones profiting from it. So yeah, let's take you to the speech here on October 6th. After his sale of stock, Powell warned that the failure to enact stimulus could have tragic economic consequences. He said the expansion was far from complete. Too little support would lead to a weak recovery, creating unnecessary hardship. Pretty much trying to put more kind of a professional focus on the White House and in what Congress is doing there at the time, I think. The same day, at 2:48 p.m., after conferring with Mnuchin, Trump tweeted that he instructed his representatives to halt negotiations with Democrats on a pandemic stimulus bill until after the election, saying, quote, "Immediately after I win, we will pass a major stimulus bill." And of course, before Trump's tweet, the Dow was up 200 points, but the market immediately tanked. It was down 376 points for the day. A day later, on October 7th, minutes of the Fed's policy setting Federal Open Market Committee released, confirming the Fed's concerns combined with the continuing policy of very low interest rates and massive bond purchases. So you can see here real actions, just phone calls, meetings, minutes released that the Fed has here. They have a real impact on the economy, especially when the Fed is taking such a role in dealing with the COVID crisis here, which is a big, big deal. So the stock sale, again, came after the September 15th to 16th meeting of the Open Market Committee, but before the minutes of the meeting released to the public. Among other warnings, the minutes reported participants continue to see uncertainty surrounding the economic outlook as very elevated, with the path of the economy highly dependent on the course of the virus and how individuals, businesses, and public officials responded to it and the effectiveness of public health measures to address it. Participants cited several downside risks that could threaten the recovery. These included insufficient fiscal stimulus and excessive risk-taking in a very low interest rate environment created by the Fed itself. So it's literally like he's playing his own game here. He is kind of making his own economic conditions to profit from, and it's almost like, kind of laughing at all of us. It's a really kind of a crazy story, and probably one that you will not hear in a lot of other places. So that's why it's always good to tune into the Spencer Walsh Show on WMFO at 1 p.m. every Monday. So you learn about how the fact that, Jerome Powell and, other Fed chairmen have already had to retire for this. Senators are, facing investigations and serious questions from it. Insider trading, it's a pretty big problem. And, it's not something that's on the front of everyone's minds, but it's just, to me, it's just another sign of how so many people in power just do not treat their citizens or their job with any kind of legitimacy or respect. That may become a bit of a theme on the show over the next coming weeks. All right, so what I'm going to do right now is take you on a little bit of a almost international tour of hip-hop and rap, because that's definitely a lot of good stuff there that a lot of people don't always know about, don't always appreciate as much as they should. And I want to go to probably one of my favorite Spanish artists, and shout out again here to the boys, especially Nas, the Houston Hall. This is a little bit of Bad Bunny and El Alfa. La Romana from X100 Pre. Don't know if I'm saying that album name right. I'm not like, a Spanish speaker, but Spanish speaker or not, you just have to absolutely love this one right here. This is La Romana with Bad Bunny and El Alfa.
Pásame la juca, que el coro ya está prendido. Las mujeres andan sin marido. Pásame la juca, por lo norte con todo estamos fríos. Demagogos no dicen ni pío. Hoy andar un like, la romana prendía mejor que Dubai. Tú eres una bandida, tú te la traes. Si le digo que llegue le cae. Ojalá y que esta noche tú seas mi mai. Y yo en nubita para el batey. Si quiero la movie la dejo en replay. Hoy andas con el bobo, que no brega ni dispara. Pero todos los Diego en PR vienen con mi cara.
Wey, ¿qué es lo que con este tigre que no floja la manguera? Dime, manín, me cosieron la boca a mí, no sé fumar yo, ¿Es tuya la juca o tú eres juquero? Él no suelta la manguera, el loco. Mierda, qué gante el este tigre. Regimile.
Pásame la juca, que el coro ya está prendido. Las mujeres andan sin marido. Pásame la juca, por lo norte con todo estamos fríos. Demagogos no dicen ni pío. Pásame la juca, que el coro ya está prendido. Las mujeres andan sin marido. Pásame la juca, por lo norte con todo estamos fríos. Demagogos no dicen ni pío. Y yo me quedo contigo hasta que se acabe la noche. Y yo me quedo contigo hasta que se acabe la noche. Y yo me quedo contigo hasta que se acabe la noche. Y yo me quedo contigo hasta que se acabe.
Y que la calle bota fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego. Y que la calle bota fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego. Caliente, 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 caliente. A mí no me compare que yo tengo para comprar la competencia. Yo firmo el movimiento entero con su descendencia. Todos los días voy para arriba y tú te desesperas. Y cada vez que subo un piso quito la escalera. Todos los demagogos me lo quite de la vera. Y como quiera se quieren quedar pegados en la tetera. La calle tiene fuego, la calle tiene falla. Como quiera que la tire, el alfa no la falla. Todo el mundo me quiere, yo tengo los chavos. Y las mujeres me lo lamen como la paleta del chavo. Hasta los demagogos me dan palo. Tú quieres que te mate a tiro, que te mate a palo. Llegando el queque, llegando el queque, llegando el queque, ya, ya. Llegando el queque, llegando el queque, llegando el queque, ya. Que la calle bota fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego. Caliente, 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 caliente.
La calle está en fuego que yo no te queme. Todos quieren ser yo, quieren mi ADN. Ya yo soy leyenda y todavía un nene. Ella no te menciona y menos si se viene. Si explotó se quedan como Pompeya. Estás escuchando a la nueva estrella. La disco prendida traigo en la botella. Pidan más, que con esa no me da. Que puta felicidad, hoy a todas se le da. Ey. Todos callados no damos detalles. Ey. Tu baby llamó pa' que yo la guaya. Indica mi loco, dame la luz, luz. ¿Quién puñeta eres tú? Tú eres un demaca, tú eres un demaca, tú eres un demaca que Kikoku.
Y que la calle bota fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego. Y que la calle bota fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego, falla, falla, fuego, fuego. Yo, ustedes no tienen cuarto, ustedes están en olla. Mándame el location que te voy a mandar 5 dembow en un Uber pa' que te pegue. Good Bunny.
There it is. That is La Romana. Now we're throwing it in with a little bit of Steve Lacy. This is In Front of Me.
You're the one I want, you're the one I need. I'm begging you, please. Can you come back to me? 'Cause I was blind to see that you were right in front of me. You were right in front of me, girl. I was blind to see that you were right in front of me. You're the one I want, you're the one I need. I'm begging you, please. Can you come back to me? 'Cause I was blind to see that you were right in front of me. You were right in front of me, girl. I was blind to see that you were right in front of me.
Ice water turn Atlantic, night calling in a phantom. Told them, don't you panic, took an island, left the mansion. Drop the roof, more expansion. Drive a coupe, you can stand, she love it, undercover. I'm a into lover. Guess we all meant for each other, now that all the dogs free. And we out in these streets. Can you do it, can you pop it for me?
Pull up in a demon on guard, looking like I still do fraud. Flying private jet with the rod. It's that Z, it's that Z. Pull up in a demon on guard, looking like I still do fraud. Flying private jet with the rod. It's that Z, it's that Z.
Oh shit. Blow the brains at the coop. Polly one on top, but I'm on mute. I'ma bust her wrist down 'cause she cute. Ice, ice. Or on the yacht, I've been on pool. She an addict for the lifestyle and the paddock. Daddy, have you ever felt Chanel fabric? I be dripping to death, I need a casket. And we got more strikes in the rough, we foul tech em. In the middle of the field like David Beckham. All my niggas locked up for real, I'm tryna help them. When I got a meal, got me the chills, don't know what happened. Pop pill, do what you feel, I'm on that zombie. I'm more like Gaddafi, I'm not no Gundy. I'm more like I'm David Goliath running. Be cloning, I find it funny. Clone, we finna know, straight out the dungeon. We finna know, hey. I go in the mouth, she costing me nothing. 300 the watch is out of your budget. 300. Mean muggin' got me clutching. Yeah, and this stick right out of Russia. Ice water turn Atlantic, night calling in a phantom. Told them, don't you panic, took an island, left the mansion. Drop the roof, more expansion. Drive a coupe, you can stand it. It's undercover, I'm an into lover. Guess we all meant for each other, now that all the dogs free. And we out in these streets. Can you do it, can you pop it for me?
Pull up in a demon on guard, looking like I still do fraud. fraud. Flying private jet with the rod. It's that Z, it's that Z. Pull up in a demon on guard. Looking like I still do fraud. Flying private jet with the rod. It's that Z, it's that Z. In a Hellcat, cause I'm a hellraiser. Self-made, I don't order, land favor. When you get that money, keep your heart. I'm sliding in a coupe, ain't got no key to start. I got to follow me in BET Awards. When your well run dry, you know you need me for it. When I pull up in a Buick, you know what I'm doing. If the police get behind me, fleeing any lure. Sleeping on the pallet, turn me to a savage. I'm a project baby, now I stay in Calabash. Like I still serve fiends, like I'm still jacking. I be sipping on lean, trying to keep balance. Take that Z-Walk, you with my Reebok. I don't say much, I just let the heat talk. Your jewelry water whoop, diamonds like re-rock. My little baby rock that dick like Seagull. When I stepped up on the scene, I was on a beam. When I jumped up out the beam, I was in saline. Baby girl, you just a fleen, that ain't what I mean. Money busting out my jeans like I do skiing. Pull up in a demon on guard. Looking like I still do fraud. Flying private jet with the rod. It's that Z, it's that Z. Pull up in a demon on guard. Looking like I still do fraud. Flying private jet with the rod. It's that Z, it's that Z.
There you go, ZZ, Travis Scott, Offset, Kodak Black on that one. A pretty good one, if I do say so myself. All right, we're going to get into our last story today. And pretty much, like, if you have ever followed either the NFL or the NBA, or just probably, like, sports, or, like, turned on ESPN ever in general, and at any time of the year for that matter, you would probably know, you would probably have a pretty good idea of who these people are. Shrams Chrania and Adam Schefter. These are like the two people in sports who break every news story about every trade, every injury, every coach firing, everything like that for the NFL and the NBA, respectively. And both of them this week had majorly embarrassing things come out about them that really just like shows you why, like, just generally people in this country despise the media so much. I think it does go a little bit beyond sports media. So this is a little piece about it in New Republic I thought was kind of interesting. So pretty much for the most of the last month, the biggest story in the NBA has been pretty simple. Why isn't Kyrie Irving vaccinated? He's like one of the best players ever. Like, what's up with that? Irving, who at this point reporters are practically required by law to describe as mercurial, has been outspoken about many issues from racial justice to flat earth theories. But on the matter of COVID-19, he has been very, very silent, doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to get into it at all. So on Tuesday evening, the mystery is finally solved, sort of. So this is about Shams. So Shams is pretty much, he works for a website called The Athletic. He's the NBA's resident scoop hound. He cracked the case, according to his report, written in kind of really tortured prose, so pretty much meaning there that he went to absolute pains to, paint Irving in kind of the best possible light. Excuse me. But Irving, he said, wasn't being held captive by misinformation or fear of needles. He wasn't even concerned about how the vaccine might affect his conditioning. Instead, Chrania wrote, citing multiple unnamed sources, that Irving was neither anti-vaccine nor anti-science. Guys, he's exactly what you want him to be. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine, totally cool. Instead, he embarked on a quest that was bigger than basketball. That quest was serving as a voice for the voiceless against vaccine mandates, the tyranny of vaccine mandates. He is standing up against that, thank goodness. And he wants to be a voice for the voiceless, and Shrams Chrania has just kind of been hired as his PR agent. Irving was, per Chrania, challenging a perceived control of society and people's livelihood according to sources with knowledge of Irving's mindset. Wonder who those sources were. While every piece Chrania writes has become pretty much a dogged adventure for his readers, it nevertheless takes very little time to realize Irving's position is, at best, nonsensical. So you got to assume here. No, this article is little more than just like a text from Irving to Shams here, talking about what his position was, and it's really important to have actually people actually fact check this stuff, because at least if you want to know about what your favorite player is doing, and as I talked about before, it is very, very important to have, these are big cultural figures. Kyrie Irving getting or not getting the vaccine is going to have a big impact especially like all these NBA fans, people who, you know, maybe a little young, live in the big cities or whatever, like think they're, you know, invincible, don't need to get vaccinated, whatever the case may be. And if they see Kyrie Irving saying like, you know, I'm just fighting to be a voice for a voiceless, they are probably, you know, that's not going to help the vaccination rates climb, if I had to guess. But it really does not help to have someone like Shrams kind of reporting on that. And that is the price that so many people pay to be in with these people. It's all about access journalism. That could be just as true for sports as it is for politics. You know, pretty much creating, you know, exactly what the source wants you to say, even though if it may be a little bit of a distorted version of the truth, even if it is kind of a juicy scoop. So Chrania's explanation into Kyrie Irving's publicity and PR department wasn't the only example of this corrupt symbiosis on display this week. ESPN's NFL scoop hound, Adam Schefter, found himself facing similar criticisms after a Wednesday report in the LA Times surfaced a 2011 email which Schefter sent an entire finished draft of a story about then ongoing NFL labor lockout to a source. So pretty much, you know, a very, very contentious issue. This was about, you know, paying the NFL players back in 2011, and pretty much what he decided to do was send it straight to the source, pretty much put it in and say, is this good with you? And he literally wrote to the NFL owner, who happened to be the owner of the, you know, at the time Redskins, now the Washington football team. He went on to say, is this good with you, Mr. Editor? Like, just so utterly embarrassing. And really just kind of like, just sad if you think about it, because like, this is someone who's like such respect with the, you know, reporting community, always breaking the stories. It's worth dwelling on the fact that he even referred to Bruce Allen, the owner there, our general manager, as Mr. Editor, because it tells you everything you need to know about this relationship. This was a significant story about an ongoing labor fight, yet Schefter gleefully handed the final edit to a major figure involved in the battle. And, you know, he's going to be, you know, fighting for not the player's side. But yeah, very, 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 very interesting there. We are going to get to our, very, very interesting story there, and we're working through a lot of this stuff, and I think it just definitely shows that the media, at the end of the day, is going to have a lot of work to do to get their credibility back in a lot of these respects, because it's not all just like, oh, people like to say, oh, it's just the, you know, people lying about the media, Trump saying it's fake news, but when these examples pile up, they really do tend to pile up. So with that, we're going to move on to our last song. This is a, you know, special request for my boy Andrew Fisher, A Fish. And yeah, I'm going to have to, you know, get ready for this one, because it is probably, you know, one of the best diss tracks from 2000 on, of this century, of the 21 or so years of this century. This is Pusha T's Story of Adidon.
Easy money. It's about to be a surgical summer. Chop the tops off the coupes. The 488. The spider joint. And you know we gotta cut the heads off these snakes, right? Watch the body drop. Drug dealing aside, ghost writing aside, let's have a heart-to-heart about your pride. Even though you're multi, I see that your soul don't look alive. The M's count different when baby divides the pie. Wait, let's examine why your music for the past few years been angry and full of lies. I started at the home front, I'm on one. Then it's gram, stay off the gram, I'm on one. You mentioned wedding ring like it's a bad thing. Your father walked away at 5, hell of a dad thing. Marriage is something that Sandy never had, Drake.